Pound of Flesh, a fanfic by Shembre. Chapter 16. Slowly, Simba scratched out the grave for his mother. She would return to the earth. Everything you see exists in a delicate balance. As king, you need to understand that balance and respect all the creatures, from the crawling ant to the leaping antelope.
But Dad, don't we eat the antelope?
Yes, son. But let me explain. When we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass. And so, we are all a part of the great circle of life. The words of his father echoed over and over through Simba's skull, ricocheting restlessly between his ears. His mother's wounds were terrible. Tears ran down his face when he realized that the outsiders hadn't allowed her to go quickly. He became flushed with shame and guilt. Hadn't he had more control over her life than he'd had over his father's? No helpless cub could save a king, but a king could prevent the death of his elderly mother. He was the king. There was nobody else but him. Why hadn't he done anything about the outsiders? Why had he waited? And now, Kovu, who'd actually acted, had been put through hell. It was only by the twisted mercy of the outsiders that Kovu was still alive. Kovu had been so sure that Simba was going to exile him, that such a scenario had crossed Kovu's mind made Simba's heart wrench. Hadn't he shown Kovu enough that he loved him, unconditionally so, as if they were the same flesh, like a true son and father? Perhaps Kovu had been hurt harder by Simba's disappointment after the visit to Zira than he'd thought. Simba's memory went back to the darkest day of his life, when he had run away from home, thinking that he was responsible for his father's death.
Ooh, what will your mother think?
What am I gonna do? The power of guilt and the fear of disappointment were both forces to be reckoned with. Simba hadn't trusted his own mother to forgive him. Maybe Zira's caustic, paranoid thoughts had slipped into her son's head, and his own fear had taken over from there. I will have to speak to him when I get home. Simba. The king snapped from his thoughts and spun around. Several lengths away from him stood a thin, scruffy, blue-eyed lioness. A smudge of blood stained her chin. She probably wasn't even aware of it, he thought. He looked around him to make sure the lioness had come alone. Don't worry, the lioness smirked. I'm all you have to worry about. What do you want? Simba bristled and stared her down. Kovu had warned him, hadn't he? He'd been so foolishly certain that he could bury his mother in peace. Why have you come back? I'm looking for my brother, the lioness demanded, and with that, Simba had the inkling that she was Zira's daughter, Vitani. Did you exile Kovu? Simba lashed his tail. No. He's at Pride Rock. Vitani stiffened. Pride Rock? Well, what will you do with him now? Simba frowned. Do with him? Isn't he your prisoner? Vitani raised an eyebrow. Are you waiting to punish him? Shaking his head, Simba replied. No, Kovu's resting. A shaman is looking after his injuries. He'll be nursed back to health. I have no reason to punish him. Vitani blinked and moved her ears as if she hadn't heard him.
What? Even after what happened?
Simba raised his chin.
Of course. Don't you blame him?
Why would I?
He's not one of you.
Simba shook with anger. He gritted his teeth. I blame myself for my mother's death more than I would ever blame Kovu. I know who is truly responsible, and it's not him. He is one of us. The lioness only twitched a lip. Simba's face flushed.
Kovu is my son. Did you think I'd blindly turn against him out of sheer anger?
Vitani stared back at Simba. Her eyes flickered slightly in thought.
Yes.
The bridge of Simba's nose crinkled.
Now that I've proved you wrong, you can get out.
Simba growled, taking a step towards Vitani.
Report back to your mother that I did not throw out the cub that I raised.
Vitani's eyes regained focus. Simba growled again.
Get out!
Alone he couldn't deal with Zira's whole pride, but taking on one lioness, even a skinny trained one, was more than feasible. Vitani continued to stare at him so intensely that she very much reminded him of her mother. Finally, she said,
You know, when I came to the Pride Lands to tell Kovu to come home, he tried to persuade me to talk to you. It's probably a little late for that now. Right?
Simba flared his nostrils. He bared his teeth a little as he replied, Yes, it's hard not to agree. It's a little too late. She moved to the right a few paces, still staring at Simba. When she moved closer to his mother's mangled corpse, he snarled a warning and tensed his shoulders.
Why didn't you kill Kovu?
She then asked.
The son of your enemy, our chosen one. Why did you raise him instead?
She flicked the end of her tail. So, if you want to talk, I'll bite. Simba lifted his chin. Because nobody deserves to be raised by your mother. Vitani pinned her ears back and sneered at Simba.
How easy it is for you to judge my mother so confidently. But I'd be stupid not to admit that Zira never should have become a mother, driving her cubs to do her bidding, filling our heads with hatred, pushing us all towards the path of violence at the first moments we were hardly physically capable. There's been no real life living under her claws, she thought. You knew what she'd raised Kovu to be. If you didn't step in, Vitani replied coolly. You saw that little cub at your paws and imagined that he'd become a monster to keep you up at night.
After a long moment, Simba gave a hint of a nod. It did cross my mind, the king admitted.
Killing him then would have ended the whole thing. Why didn't you?
Another king might have killed him, but I know how precious the life of a cub is. Vitani lashed her tail.
Zira and the other lionesses seemed to think you felt otherwise.
They had it wrong, Simba pursed his mouth. All of that was in Zira's head.
A lot of everything's just in Mother's head, she thought. It's like she never looks outside of herself.
But I doubt that you care about anything I have to say about your mother. Simba went on, catching Vitani's attention once more. I'm the enemy you've been taught to hate for as long as you can remember. If you didn't believe Kovu, you won't listen to me. Simba trailed off, and Vitani waited for the king of the Pride Lands to speak again. Maybe things would have turned out better if my son's death hadn't clouded my judgment all those years ago, he said.
It wouldn't have turned out differently.
Vitani spat before she knew the bitter words had come out of her mouth. She then raised an eyebrow and stared at Simba until the anger in his eyes and tension in his shoulders made her wonder if he was about to launch.
"You don't know what to do about my mother, do you?" she guessed. "Kovu wouldn't have visited the Outlands if he thought you knew what you were doing."
Simba's jaw tensed. Why was Vitani talking to him? Why wasn't he dead yet? She'd had every opportunity to kill him. Instead, she was picking apart his mind. He also felt ashamed that he truly didn't know how to deal with Zira without resorting to violence. Vitani looked at Sarabi's body. Though Simba wasn't so sure she really saw the murdered lioness or not. Simba had the impression that she would have looked at a rock in the same exact way.
"My pride is starving," Vitani finally admitted. "We've been starving for too long, and I believe Mother's finally lost all sense of reality. I don't think she'll be coming back."
Simba's eyes narrowed in thought. Does this mean that Vitani sees things for what they are? Maybe she isn't just another blind follower.
"We need something to change."
Her eyes shifted back to Simba. A chill ran down Simba's spine and he let out a growl. Maybe she was there after all to do what Kovu hadn't. What Zira refused to do herself. Vitani lowered her head. Simba waited for her to pounce. But when he analyzed her pose, he realized that she wasn't threatening him at all. She looked almost diplomatic.
Simba.
The lionesses that Nala must have sent arrived and stood beside their king, glowering at Vitani. "Good thing we came," one lioness snarled. "What are you doing here? Killing our queen mother wasn't enough for you. Get out of here before we kill you too." Vitani raised her head, her lip curled. Her eyes were on Simba, and the calm look he'd seen in her eyes was gone. She was cold once more. She said nothing as she turned away, nor did she need to say anything, Simba supposed. "Go on, get out of here. Get lost with the tail tucked between your legs." As Vitani ran away, Simba knew then that his hatred of the outsiders had spread beyond himself, as Zira's hatred had spread to her followers. He'd kept hatred alive in his pride. Maybe if he'd forgiven the outsiders, it would have been different. Perhaps the environment that Kovu had stepped into would have been more hospitable. Perhaps what the lionesses had done to Vitani now wouldn't have happened. "Glad we came, sire." Simba turned to the lionesses. They looked confused when they saw that he was angry. "Sire, what was the outsider doing here?" one asked timidly. He tried to soften his expression. "I'm not sure, but I think she was tired of living the way she's been living. It's not like they don't deserve it, especially now." The lionesses all noticed Sarabi on the ground. They went to her. They then noticed that Simba had started to bury her. They worked on the grave for him while he thought. Maybe, he thought, maybe things don't have to come to a war. But I'm not sure. After what just happened, Vitani looked with so much hatred at those lionesses. I wish I knew what she'd been about to say. Simba knew that he had to act fast. His heart was set to a quick beat and his whole body tingled. At this moment, Zazu landed on his shoulder, startling him from his reverie. He whispered to the bird, "Zazu, bring Vitani back. Find her." The majordomo shuddered. The outsider? But why? Shh. I have to speak with her before she goes home. Something was on her mind. The other lionesses looked over for a second, but continued to dig. Now go, Zazu. But go. Zazu took flight. Oh, of course, sire. If there's a way to end this without violence, this might be my only chance. End of chapter 16.